The goal that we have in these meetings is to bring visibility to coaching supervision in Asia. And we are lucky to have with us Michel Moral, who is one of the pioneers of coaching supervision in the world. He has written many books on coaching, coaching supervision, and most of the supervision stuff is in French. But he's also a researcher. Right? He's doing a lot of research on different topics related to supervision, including supervision and supervision. So we are playing together in some of these works, so you will hear about that soon. So I want to welcome everybody who are here today. Sue, who just joined us, Tram, welcome. And
Sam, good to see you.
Sue is going to be presenting next month. Is that correct? Or soon? I don't know. We're talking about that. I was coming up with the schedule for the next sessions. When are you going to be presenting?
Hi everyone. I'll be presenting next month.
Okay, good. So I was right.
Wonderful.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So
Look
many
forward
things
to
going
it.
on. I want to share. I am organizing a conference coming up next weekend. So there is a lot going on. But it's great to be here. And today we have with us Dharmesh Mistry. He's a graduate from our program, and he presented this instrument during the program. And I personally loved it, and I thought it would be great if you want to bring it to the space. Our goal in this space is to bring visibility to supervision to Asia, to get a community of colleagues learning together, sharing resources, sharing information, and supporting everyone in building your practice. So this is our goal. Thank you for being here. And Dharmesh, will be good if at some point we can have something interactive so people can also spend some time together.
Sure.
It would be great. So what would you like people to know about you? How do you would like to introduce yourself?
Well, whatever you know, Damien, you can talk about it. I don't think there is too much, though.
You're very humble. You're very humble, like everybody here in this group. So, what would you like people to know about you? It doesn't have to be
Well,
professional.
okay.
Talking about you
Yeah.
personally.
So, I mean, I think this is a collection of peers, and I'm just so happy to be with all of you out here. Just to kind of give a quick background, I did my uh, coaching supervision certification course with Damien, and some of my colleagues, Tram, are here. And we spent about good 8-9 months last year together. And I have interacted a lot with Damien. And during that course, of course, I got introduced to this whole Barrett values uh, somewhere, I think in 2017, 2018. And I think since then, I have made a lot of efforts to study that. Uh, it's a great, very simple tool, but a great tool from a coaching perspective. So this is an attempt to kind of bring the same tool and explain it to all of you, and just see where it takes us, and what we can learn about ourselves when we use this tool. And just for those who came late, Michel Moral, who is here with us, is a BVC trainer himself, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more insights that he might be able to kind of provide uh, onto what we are discussing out here. And just to kind of tell more about myself, I've been in corporate for about 25, 28 years, and then on my own. So today I operate as a independent coach and an OD consultant operating out of Bangalore in India. So yeah, that's about me. Thank you, Damien.
That's great. Thank you for being here and accepting my invitation to share with us this tool. And would you like to share in the chat room the link if anybody didn't have the chance to receive the email in
Let
advance
me
to do the
do
test?
that right away. All right. So I'm just searching for that link, but it'll just take a couple of minutes, I guess.
And while Dharmesh is doing that, may I add one more sentence about him?
Yes, definitely. Go for
So
it.
he's an amazing supervisor. I benefited greatly from the association with Dharmesh, and it's opened up a whole new perspective and a whole new world for me as a coach. So thank you for
Thank
that.
you. Thank you, Aparna. Thank you. Well, Sim, thank you for sharing that link. So just an invitation for all those who have not received that link from Damien earlier. Maybe we can take 5 minutes and click on that link and take the assessment. I think it will be very helpful towards the second part of our discussion in case you have not done. For those who have already done it, it's great. I mean, we can just open up the room for introducing each other, but let's take about 2-3 minutes, or as I go along, perhaps you can take that. It's a very simple tool. It just allows you to kind of select 10 phrases from the list of 90 odd phrases. And the report will come to your email. Don't worry about the report right now. We will look at it towards the end. So those who have not, maybe my invitation to just click on the link which is there in the chat room and just take the survey.
It's interesting. I want to share while people are looking for that, doing that. When I train coaches, and I have not done that in the last programs, but in a couple of programs when I was training coaches, I was doing an exercise about values and to identify values. How do I identify values with clients? So that in some way allow clients to align their choices, their development plans to what's matter to them. And sometimes what's matter to us is clear and sometimes it's not. So I think that this tool really help us to clarify and identify what is important and what are our values. One exercise that I used to do, Dharmesh, was to ask, I would do a demo in front of the class. So I would bring one of the participants and I would say, let's imagine that you inherited the amount of money that you need for the rest of your life without having to work. And that will be different for everyone. So I don't put the number. So you inherited enough money, you don't have to work for the rest of your life. What would you do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then explore that. And sometimes people have a lot of problems identifying what that is. So you keep asking and keep asking and keep exploring and going deeper there and see what's come up. There is what's really important. When you don't have to, when you don't need the money and you can really spend the time doing something that you really love, what is it? And sometimes it's what you're doing. So some of us, I think we're very lucky that we love what we do.
Yeah. So Damien, what you're saying is going from needs to consciousness and being aware of what you need and what you really need.
And that awareness allow us to make some decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Meanwhile, while people are taking it, Damien, can you give me the rights to share my screen? Because I would want kind of...
Yeah, you're co-host now.
Thank you. So I'll just start with the sharing of the screen and just let me know if we are able to see that.
Yes, we can see it.
Fantastic. So should I begin? I mean, I'm sure people have taken the survey and let me begin. I'm trying to be conscious of time also. And we need some time for engagement and certain reflections later on. So, okay. So very quickly, the agenda for today is to share with you about this model, which is called the Barrett model, and how it applies to our own growth as coaches and supervisors. I think that's the second part that I was wanting to kind of get into. So before we begin, I think we all know the iceberg model. We are all coaches and we understand the difference between what we see and what we don't see. And human beings are also like iceberg. What is noted is all the individual behavior, and what is underneath the water level is all the mindsets, the beliefs, the values, and the needs. And if a tool allows us to kind of go quickly into the depths, I think this is one tool which we can very clearly use in our coaching, which will allow our coachees to explore their beliefs, their values, and their needs. And that would give a good segue to connect it to their goals in terms of the behavior change that they wish to have. But this is an important aspect, But then we ask what are values, and we know that values describe our personal motivations, uh, which determine how we live and how we feel. Uh, when we live according to our values consistently uh, and repeatedly over time, we experience a sense of satisfaction. I mean, we know that we are living in alignment with what we feel is important to us. And when we lead our lives according to our values, we experience balance, both internally in terms of how we feel and externally in terms of how we interact with others and the rest of the world. So by identifying what we value and reflecting on how we actually live, we get a picture of where we may be out of balance. And this tool help us to kind of see certain aspects of out of balance. And when we are out of balance, we may not necessarily, act in a way which are healthy. I mean, we experience frustrations with ourselves, uh, and we even express frustrations on others. Uh, so, so when we are out of balance and not living our values, we experience frustration. Values also tend to kind of describe what motivates us in the present, what are our aspirations, what are our intentions, and where are we navigating our life, and what is yet to emerge for us. What it will help us propel towards the life purpose and our inner calling as what important, which is what Damien uh, tried to explain by sharing that example as to if you have inherited all the money that you need in this world, what would you do? And that kind of propels us to find our inner calling. So our values together with our beliefs influences our behavior and our decision making, and they provide the energy and focus behind our aspirations and intentions. So with that background, I mean, I'm sure when you're taking the survey, you are choosing the phrases which are in some sense representative of various values that you hold. And these gets plotted over the 7 levels of consciousness, which is called the Barrett model. So good to go, Damien. I mean, let's look at thumbs up with attention out here, kind of make sure that everyone's here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So this is the model in its totality. There are 7 levels, and you will see those values being plotted at these 7 levels. The level 1 being of survival, which is satisfying our physical and safety needs. Level 2 is all about relationship, where we start feeling a sense of belonging and love, and it's all about our family values and friendships, and all those kind of things. Level 3 is about self-esteem, which is all about feeling the sense of self-worth. And together, level 1, 2, and 3 create an area of self-interest, which is more about looking after our own needs. Level 4 is where we kind of get into a transformation, which we develop the courage to let go of our fears and explore the world which is beyond our basic survival needs and relationship needs and self-esteem needs. And once we do that, we start to find meaning in life and try to create an internal cohesion, try to become completely know who we really are, be authentic, which is all happens at level 5. And at level 6, knowing who we are, we want to kind of now start making a positive difference in the world. And then level 7 is all about, level 6 is about finding your purpose and starting to kind of, work towards the purpose. And level 7 is all about living your purpose, where everything that you do is towards, the purpose that you have discovered, completely authentic self. So it's about selfless service. And if you see level 5, 6, and 7 are together about the common good. And really the transition, I wouldn't say transition, but it's about understanding as to what drives us and where our values are concentrated. But before we go, I'm kind of going ahead of myself. I mean, it's a framework. This this model is a framework to understanding thinking and behavior of both individuals and organizations. And the reason I'm bringing in organization is I do realize a lot of us out here, along with coaches, are also looking at system. And, you know, our coachees are part of organizations, and how these 7 values also apply to a collective is also an important aspect. And we may not explore much on that aspect here, but I'll just very quickly allude to that in one of the slides later on. But this can be applied to individuals, this can be applied to leadership, this can be applied to organizations, this can be applied to societies and even countries. And there are different labels and interpretations of those 7 values, but in principle, the 7 values remain the same. The first 3 are all about our inner need. Then we go through the transformation, and the next three are about creating a common good in the world. So, so for example, this slide shows how from a personal need, it gets translated and the labels get changed when these values or these 7 levels start becoming applied to organizations. So survival becomes viability. You know, it's all about, you know, ensuring stability and financial security, profit, safety from an organization perspective. Relationships is all about relationships. Again, it remains the same, but again, about customer satisfaction, family, friendship, listening, respect, all of that aspect comes here. The whole self-esteem part becomes performance in organizations, and which is all about achieving excellence. And then transformation is about evolution, which you know, adaptability, diversity, empowerment, and basically courageously evolving the organization. The level 5 of internal cohesion becomes alignment, you know, where as an organization and its people and the leadership, we are able to clearly express ourselves authentically. It's all about commitment, honesty, positive attitude, transparency, trust, etc. And level 6 is about cultivating communities, and you know, which is where you start going into making a difference, where you start involving the community, you start collaborating, partnerships, and all these things are very important at some level. And at level 6 and 7th level is about organizations living their purpose and contributing to the world, creating new futures, long-term perspective, etc. So just very quickly wanted to kind of show how these values apply to both individuals and the collective as an organization. And not surprising, Richard Barrett, who kind of created these values, this model, hugely influenced by Maslow's. And if you see the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these are the same needs, psychological safety needs. We all know about this. And what has happened out here is that the first 2 needs are collapsed into level 1. And then the relationship and self-esteem needs are at level 2 and 3. And the self-actualization is actually blown up into 4 more levels and involves satisfying one's own growth needs through these levels of transformation and beyond. So again, very quickly to take you through each one of these. I mean, level 1 is on a personal level, is about health, financial stability, and it can also have some kind of a limiting, we can have limiting values where we operate from a sense of fear. So if there is job insecurity or caution or not having enough aspect, then that reflects also at level 1. From an organization perspective, it's all about profit, shareholder value, employee health, safety, etc. But again, the limiting value could be excessive control, you know, either on cost or on everything else, and exploitation, etc. At level 2, it's all about personal relationships, family, friendship, Again, some of the limiting values which can be expressed out here. If we are operating from a space or a fear of not being loved enough or not belonging, the values can, or the behaviors can be more demanding or wanting to be liked. Uh, next is at level 3, which is at about self-esteem level, and from an organization, a performance level. It's all about self-confidence, success. And again, as we will see in the subsequent slides, how if we are operating from the fear of not being good enough, it can lead to aspects of perfectionism and wanting to kind of, or even some sense of arrogance. Um, so these are the 3 levels, and the first 3 levels could have the limiting values also associated with them. Well, then we come to a stage of transformation where we, like we said, we tend to kind of give up our fears, develop the courage to get into personal growth. And it's all about adventure, learning, personal development. So it's basically courageously evolving. And then level 5 is about internal cohesion. And this is where we actually start discovering who we really are once we start to evolve and give up our fears. Some of the values which are associated at this level are trust, enthusiasm, generosity. And again, you can see the values, corresponding values from an organizational level. Level 6 is all about making a difference or collaboration when it comes to organization. The values associated at this level are about dialogue, coaching and mentoring, volunteering work, and from an organization perspective, employee fulfillment, leadership development, cross-unit collaboration, etc., starts to show up here. And finally, at level 7, which is all about service, selfless service, the values associated at personal levels are about vision, humility, future generation, wisdom, long-term perspective, social responsibility, etc. So this was just a brief of the 7 levels. And before we get into any application, I just want to kind of pause here and see if there are any questions coming up. And I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but if there are any questions, let me just give a couple of minutes pause before we can get into the next session. Next.
Do you want to stop sharing? Do you want to stop sharing so you can see everybody's?
Sure. Yeah.
So it will be easier for you to identify anybody want to have any comment, reaction. Sunny has a question.
Yes, Sunny.
Well, I don't have a question, but I really appreciated this because I did this values exercise with a board of directors this past Saturday, and they came up with their core values as a group. And one of the reasons why I use this is that when people get in disagreement and they go back to their core group values, they can follow that in terms of resolving their differences. So if those things the board decides fit into those values, complement those values, it's easier for them to all be in alignment. And I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Sunny, for throwing light on that aspect. And you know, when it comes to organizations, the collective values of the organizations actually form the culture of the organization. And how your personal values contrast with the collective is also an interesting analysis that one can do to gain more insight in terms of where you could be in misalignment, either from a culture perspective or from a personal value perspective. Yeah, good point.
Dharmesh, I have a question.
Yeah.
So when I did, I won't call it test, when I did the evaluation, I found my values spread across from 2 to 7. And so that made me a little confused that, at what stage of evolution am I? Because some are sitting in 2 and 3, and some are sitting at 6. So I was a little confused about
Sure.
understanding that.
Yeah, and if you can hold on to that question, because that's an important aspect. How do we interpret our values? And just to kind of allude, I think what is important for us when we look at the reports that we get in our email box pretty soon, when we start looking at that report, what is important to us is to see the pattern and to see if there are any unusual concentration. What's the spread? Which are the areas which are having more values than the other? And does that correspond with the life stage where I am, or the context in which I'm operating today? Uh, what are perhaps the areas where there are less values or no values, and what does it mean to us, and all those kind of things. So Aparna, what you said is you have it at the spread from 2 to 7, and we will just come on to that. But it's also about looking at how the spread is, and uh, let me hold on to
Yeah,
answering
sure.
that more in detail. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank
Dharmesh, hi, this is Herman in Singapore. I kind of, when you brought in the thing about Maslow, it was sitting with me, and I thought, of course, it seems so obvious. But
Yeah.
the other model that I was curious about is, like, let's say Kagan's cognitive development model. And I was
Right.
wondering, how does this correspond to things like that, like, cognitive development? Has there been any research looking at correspondence with this value? It's a developmental model. It looks like
Absolutely, absolutely.
with
It's a development model. It's sorry, Herman. Please go
yeah,
ahead.
just that. Is there any correlation to other things besides, Maslow? And I offered like Kagan's, cognitive
Yeah,
development model.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a beautiful question, because I think Richard Barrett very much says that he's been influenced by a lot of Eastern, Oriental, as
Uh,
well as Western thinking, and he has fused the two, and we can see a lot of. So I'm not so much aware of how the Kagan model kind of comes in, but I can
mhm,
understand those are three kind of levels of
yeah,
evolution from a
yeah,
cognitive perspective. Uh, it also kind of corresponds to the chakras, or the Vedic model of chakras, where we have
hmm,
the 7 chakras in our body, and it corresponds to the hedonic or eudaimonic theory,
yeah,
which was proposed by Aristotle. There's a self-determination theory. So there's a lot of
okay,
corresponding theories which kind of validate this, or helps us understand
okay,
that this is based on multiple learnings and multiple
okay.
philosophies.
Could I follow up with an entirely different question? As I was looking at this and listening to you, and I was wondering, what would it be if someone was totally like all at 6 and 7? And I started imagining that they're not grounded. As one
Yeah, absolutely.
interpretation, they are like, hello, and so I'm, not knowing much about the model. And I was just sort of thinking, what would be a good thing? Would it be good to have some grounding as well as some, sort of transformational thinking? Or and I'm assuming you'll get into that later.
I'm getting into that later.
Okay, then
Uh,
we'll let it go. Then
we'll
we'll
let
let
it
it
go.
go. Yeah,
But it's a beautiful question, and I will kind of address both of these in terms of
yeah.
full concentration at particular levels, and what does it
Okay,
mean, and what does it mean by the spread. Thank you, Herman.
okay.
All right. Are there any
you.
more?
Ramesh, one more question.
Yeah.
Sorry, very quickly. So while choosing the words, if my level of self-awareness is not high, it may happen that I choose what I should rather
Yes.
than what I do.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
that conflict was there for me as well.
Yes.
So I don't know how you would
Hmm.
respond to that.
Yeah, so that typically happens, and that's where if the values are showing your intentions, and if you're not living that, one needs to kind of look at it and correspond it with the behavior that one is having. And for example, in coaching, if I was coaching you, we would go back to kind of saying that, okay, this seems to be an aspiration model, because what you have shared about yourself, or what issues we are dealing with, doesn't seem to correspond with that. so it can show up the gaps that we are having between where we are and where we wish to be. But uh, the survey or the assessment asks clearly to kind of state where you currently are. And you're right, sometimes people do kind of skip on to getting into aspirations and intentions, but that can show up as we try to debrief the report.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you for, yes, Peter, you've raised your hand, sorry.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, the model in a way is set up like something universal, and how does it relate to cultural differences, which can be quite important?
I'm not aware, but what I'm aware of, and maybe Michelle can kind of come in here to answer that, but I think this spans cross-culture because it is about human evolution. And frankly, I'm not very sure. Michelle, do you want to jump in to kind of answer that, if there is any cultural differences from various regions or countries?
I have done a number of surveys with multinational companies, and so it was possible to compare groups of people, for instance, in the same activity, who are working in different countries. And so what I would say is that the tool reflects, the tool was designed to analyze the corporate culture. And so I would say that 70% of the results show what is a corporate culture. But when you have the same company in different countries, you see that there are big differences which are due to the local culture. So I would say that about 20 to 30% of what the tool shows is related to local culture. And sometimes there are big differences. I've done a survey last year with people in Singapore, in US, in Germany, in France. It was amazing to see how local culture can reflect on the results. For instance, for the French group, there was a lot of values in level 2. And while in US, a lot in level 3. So it was very obvious to see the difference.
I was curious about whether what is the cultural bias shown in the instrument itself and in the model itself. Just curious.
So the model itself doesn't kind of talk about any cultural differences across countries. But when we try to apply that, I think it becomes, so the model is not in terms of, or the report that you get is not unlike any other, let's say, assessment. I think the report becomes a great tool to further inquire. So if there are differences, what is causing those differences? Are there local cultural aspects, or are there contextual aspects which are creating the difference? Because many times within the same country and the same organizations, one can see cultural differences between various departments. So the report, I think, gives you an opportunity to get more curious about it, rather than say that, okay, this could be because of this culture. So it's not definitive in that sense, but it becomes a great tool to inquire further. Yeah, does it help, Peter?
Yeah, I'm still left a little bit with like, to what extent is this a universal model that can show up regional and local differences? And to what extent it's a model that already has some biases built into it? Maybe we can't answer that question, but I think it's an interesting one.
I'm sorry, maybe I can do some more reading about it and come up but Sunny wants to kind of add to it. You're on mute.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found is because this particular model, I've never worked with Barrett's model directly, but the relationship it has to the hierarchy of needs, it definitely has some biases, because I think it was Aparna who asked about awareness, self-awareness, and that influences people's values. I think in certain communities, in certain cultures, ethnic cultures, there really isn't a differentiation between wants and needs. That is not clearly defined from an experiential standpoint. So when you ask someone, what do you need? They may tell you what they want, not what they necessarily need. So in that relationship to this model, there are definitely inherently some biases that I think it would have to be interpreted according to the community, ethnic, racial, or whatever, in terms of what people see as valuable because of their experience.
That's right. Right, thank you. In interest of time, I would like to kind of just further go ahead. All right, thank you for that interaction. All right, so this is an important aspect when we try to kind of look at this model from going from needs to consciousness to be aware of. So when we have, for example, underlying fear-based beliefs about being able to meet our deficiency needs, our subconscious mind will stay focused on finding ways to satisfy those needs. So for example, if you look at the first level of consciousness or first level of need, which is the survival need, when a person has a subconscious fear-based belief at the survival level, no matter how much of money they earn, they will always want more. And I just recollect one of the interviews of Deepak Chopra. I think it was Saturday Night Live. I think he was kind of talking about, and this is the time when Trump was elected, and he said Trump is operating from the first level of chakra, and which is all about survival. And for him, enough is never enough. I mean, he's perhaps one of the richest men in the world, but or is most powerful, but he still operates from that level of fear of, at level 1. And this could be because of their early experiences. They feel they cannot trust the universe to provide for them. Therefore, they must be vigilant, earn as much or gain power as much as they can, and watch every penny they spend. And such people can remain focused at the survival level of consciousness all their lives, even though compared with others, they are much financially off. So it's about creating that level of awareness, saying that what is my need and where am I being aware that this is actually habituated or because of certain belief that I carry that I'm, and it's not an actual need. So this helps us explore some of those things for ourselves, and when we do it for our coaches or the collective as an organization and a system. Similarly, about relations consciousness, when a person has a subconscious fear-based belief at the love and belonging level of consciousness, no matter how much of love and affection they get, they will always want more. They cannot get enough. They want to experience the love and affection that was not accorded to them in their childhood. And such people can remain focused at the love and belonging level of the consciousness all their lives, even though they may be in loving relationships. And you would always find such kind of people who are having trouble with relationships or maintaining relationships, because what they are trying to demand from the relationship is much more than what they already have. And the people who are giving into that relationship starts getting tired in giving so much, and that ends up impacting their relationship. So if you operate, for example, from that level, so these are operating with some of the limiting beliefs concept that we all have. The first level of survival, the limiting belief is in the area of I don't have enough. The operating level of relationships is that I'm not loved enough or I don't belong. And if you're carrying that belief, you'll always want to experience that love and affection. And similarly, at the level 3, when a person has a subconscious fear-based belief at self-esteem level, no matter how much of praise or accolades they get, they will always feel wanting to more. And the limiting belief in this area is, I'm not good enough. And we all have some of those aspects of limiting belief across all 3 areas. And we need to kind of explore how much of that is leading to my current situation and what I'm doing. So, so they want to experience respect, recognition, which was not accorded to them in earlier teenage years, and they can remain focused at self-esteem level of consciousness all their life, even though their accomplishments are frequently acknowledged and they have reached the zenith of um, their accomplishments. So this actually leads us to kind of, exploring where are we moving into, and this is where the whole aspect of ego to soul kind of comes in, and I'm borrowing this term from Richard Barrett himself. And the first 3 areas are all about ego. It's all about self-protection, and how can we move from ego to soul, and how can we create the transformation within ourselves? And that is where we start to kind of look at transformation. So transformation actually starts to occur when we find the freedom and autonomy to be who we are. When we begin to inquire into our true nature, we learn to make our own choices, to develop our own voice, independent of our parental cultural conditioning, and thereby become the author of our own life. And this is an important preliminary step before we enter the first level of self-actualization, which gets into level 5, which is all about internal cohesion. So at this level, our ego motivations merge with our soul motivations. We want our identity, we want to identify ourselves as or our unique gifts and talents, and we find our personal transcendent purpose, our calling or vocation. We become soul infused personality wanting to lead a values driven or purpose driven life. And typically we find a lot of correspondence with the evolution through our life. And typically we get into this stage, which is called the midlife crisis, when we are actually searching for who we are and what we are here for. And many times it is about transcending that barrier of transformation and figuring it out who we really are and what do we stand for. Once we kind of collect ourselves and are truly operating at authentic level, we are able to kind of see the second level of self-actualization, which is about making a difference. And at this level, one begins to feel the sense of empathy towards the disadvantaged. One would want to kind of use their gifts and talents to support and help them. Sorry.
Oh,
okay.
Sorry.
No problem. You would want to improve the world. You learn that you can make a bigger difference if you connect and collaborate with others who share the same values and the same sense of purpose. And finally, when you get into the third level of self-actualization, you get into the area of selfless service. And you arrive at this level of consciousness when your pursuit of making a difference becomes a way of life. You begin to feel a sense of compassion for the world. Wherever you are, you want to be of service to others. You just want to help in any which way you can, using your true authentic self and using your network, your collaboration, and everybody who is enrolled into that similar manner of thinking. And at this level, you learn how to show love and kindness in all situations. You learn to be at ease with uncertainty, and tap into the deepest source of your wisdom. So the question that Aparna asked and Herman asked about the concentration. So there is this whole aspect of full spectrum consciousness. So with actually a lot of experience and some gray hair, we may be fortunate enough to have learned how to master every stage of psychological development. Our ego needs are kind of satisfied, our soul desires are satisfied, and we will be operating from a full spectrum consciousness. So when we are operating from this full spectrum, we can respond appropriately to all situations that life throws at us with inner calm, without fear, upset, or anxiety. So that brings me to the question that Herman asked, saying that, okay, what is if that's everything is at level 6 and 7? And frankly, Herman, I do see a lot of people that I coach in the social sector have that kind of a values, because they see the world and wanting to make a difference all the time and wanting to be of service without paying attention to their own needs. And they always find themselves frustrated at their personal level. They are suffering because they are not able to pay enough attention to their finances. They are not able to kind of, uh, I know of one person who was dealing with children education, um, and he was trying to kind of put people into schools and children from the disadvantaged community into school and all. And he felt frustrated because he couldn't afford a good school for his own children. And you know uh, undue concentration at certain level and forgetting certain level can create imbalances in our life, and those imbalances can impact uh, us as a whole person, because we do need to recognize we have the needs, and which needs to be fulfilled. We also need to recognize and be aware that are we paying undue attention to those needs. So need for survival is important, need for safety is important, need for relationship is important, need for self-esteem is important. But if there is undue attention to those needs, we may be holding ourselves and our energies from impacting larger stuff which we can do, and we feel hollow. On the other hand, if we ignore those needs, we may be in some kind of a delusion, and we may be trying to kind of work very hard, but without actually being able to create the right kind of impact. So just want to kind of pause here and want to kind of get into reflection on where we are operating from. And Damien, we can do this either in groups or maybe give some time for individuals to kind of reflect and come back. So this is the time to go back.
We have only 10 minutes to finish, because these sessions are 1 hour. So
yeah, sure. So let's not get into group. Maybe what we can do is take a pause for a couple of minutes. Maybe you all can go into the report that you have gotten and just explore these questions. Where am I operating from? How is what is the pattern showing for myself? What ego states are holding me back? What will it take for me to move forward to a full spectrum consciousness? And perhaps what possibilities emerge for me as I move towards full spectrum consciousness?
Dharmesh, can I ask a data question almost? On the
Sure.
report, they talk about, it's on page 4, positive and potentially limiting. Could you say a word about, that? I mean, does it mean some of the choices could have been like limiting? I mean, I don't see anyway, leave it at that. Can you say something about that distinction?
Sure. So I was talking about it when we were looking at moving from needs to consciousness. Because what happens is that if we are operating from a fear-based belief about ourselves, we could display some of the values which are potentially limiting values.
So the choices we made, some of those choices themselves would be identified as potentially limiting.
That's right. That's right.
I see.
So,
okay.
So for example, at individual level, respect could be a positive value, but wanting, or I don't know the exact phrase, but wanting to be loved is a limiting value. Or from an organization perspective, profits can be a positive value, but cost control can become a negative value.
I understand.
It's
Thank
about
you,
how we
man.
see that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've just got Dharmesh got a question as well. When we raised about, for example, a survival consciousness, and if someone is very deep rooted there, and there's a lot of fear, then how do we help shift them to the next level so they don't get stuck?
Yeah. So it's important to see the context in which they are operating. So to quickly bring one clear example from my own coaching. I did have one executive from a large firm in India, which was dealing in energy, generating electricity, and it's a huge firm. And this gentleman was the legal head of one of the divisions, and late 40s, but very handsome, very well built, fit, um, but huge amount of concentration of values at level 1. And in our conversation, we figured out that he had a very bad accident earlier when he was in his 20s. And he proudly says that the face that you see out here is 80% reconstructed. And he was able to kind of share as to how that left him so shattered about life, and he was this close to dying, that he understood the importance of good health and maintaining good health. So he eats very well, he exercises, everything he does very well. But even today, when he is healthy, his focus remains on that area rather than trying to kind of explore other stuff. And because he's in late 40s now, he's exploring emptiness and wanting to kind of, go beyond and do certain things. And he was able to kind of see, saying that if I release some of the energies which are not needed out here, because I know I'm secure, I'm not what I was when I was 22, when I had that accident. So one is able to kind of recognize that and then move through releasing some of those energies for the other aspects and other important values that they aspire for.
Thank you.
Right. So let's get into the discussion and see if there's anything wants to kind of share. So Peter has a comment, interesting to see the phrase full spectrum. There's an interesting mix of model that is hierarchical and one what is honoring the spectrum, which is non-hierarchical. You want to share a little bit more, Peter? What do you mean? You're on mute, sorry.
Sorry, I just thought that was interesting difference, because there's something a little bit Western and
yes,
aggressive about hierarchies, and the spectrum is more kind of encompassing and holistic. And maybe it's nice that there's a mix of those two in that model.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, it is indeed. And I find a lot of people who say that, oh, I think from a hierarchy perspective, I should be at higher level. And it's not about the hierarchy anymore. It's about being aware of the spectrum and saying that, where do I operate from? And is it making sense for me at this juncture? So for example, with this whole COVID and pandemic, there are a lot of people whose values have gone down to basic needs. And it is perfectly fine. I mean, because the context has changed for all of us. And if you don't take care of our health, we might be in a situation which is not very pleasant.
This is an interesting question, Dharmesh, because it seems that this can be affected by culture, can be affected by context, can be affected for many variables, and it's moving. It's like I did it last year, and I did it again today.
Yes,
it's not the same.
Yes, it's not the same.
Same.
And one should keep doing that and that's the beautiful thing about this. The personal value assessment is free of cost, and you can keep taking it, and you see how things are evolving. And for me, when I took it for this session, I was surprised to realize how things have changed for me through this pandemic, and there is far more concentration at relationships. Uh, because at a personal level, I have my aged parents, and caring for them becomes important for me. And my son is away from me for a long period of time, and you're not able to meet. And so the relationship and family values have suddenly started to gain so much importance for me at this juncture. And it's good to kind of evaluate oneself.
So it seems that we need more than 1 hour to go over the.
Yeah. Yeah.
But before we finish, what I want to make the connection to supervision. And what I want to, I think in a couple of minutes, what the connection that Dharmesh, I am thinking that you also presented in class is that when coaches are dealing with clients related to values, as supervisors, we can recommend this tool. So I do believe that as supervisor, it's important that we are familiar with different tools, different models, different theories. The more that we have in the toolkit, the more we can share ideas, models that can be helpful for coaches to work with clients who are dealing with these issues. So for example, if a client is dealing with values issues, knowing this instrument will help the supervisor to suggest to use the instrument as a way of discussion. Now, what we all learned here too, and the question that people were asking, including Peter and Herman, is that this may not be the perfect tool. Maybe there are other tools too, but they want more tool and in one more place to look at values. And at the end of the day, as Dharmesh, as you said, how we create a conversation around it and how we create curiosity around it. And instead of finding solutions, we find questions around it.
Absolutely.
We all want solutions. We want what to do, but it's also about opening questions to think. And I do believe that he's here where supervisors, we can do something about it. Sunny, you want to add something?
I just wondered whether this has some underlying purpose for parallelism. So that people's values, if they are very similar, is one of the reasons why the parallels show up in supervision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one place to go. This is a favorite place for Michelle to go and look at it. And Michelle, before we go, I'm wondering, since you are also a trainer on this instrument, anything you want to add before we go? Because we are at the top of the hour, we finish.
Well, there is a mountain of things to say, but first of all, I mean, I compare the tool to a thermometer graduated every 10 degrees. And what I say to my clients is that, well, it's better to have a thermometer graduated every 10 degrees than no thermometer at all. I mean, it's because you have some kind of measurement and you can start a discussion. So that's quite important. Well, in supervision, I use a tool in order to analyze some categories of ethical dilemmas when it's possible to identify the values. So it's quite a nice tool to do that. And as a coach, I make a lot of money with it, I tell you. a lot of money. I'm involved in cultural transformation of one of the biggest banks in France, for instance, and really it's really nice to conduct a cultural transformation with that kind of tool. Tell you, but I was curious this morning to have some ideas of how to use it in supervision because I'm a bit limited. So, but if you have ideas, welcome.
And we can continue the conversation. We don't need to finish here. So I think that this to be continued. I think we need to keep another spaces to keep the conversation. Unfortunately, we need to wrap up for today. Thank you, Dharmesh, for a great session. Next month we'll have Suk from India too presenting. Suk, do you want to tell people what you're going to be doing next month?
Sure. So what has been an area of interest for me has been building your internal supervisor. For some reason, this phrase has been stuck in my head from the time I completed the supervision certification, and I have read up. There are some ideas, that I have put together. So in my session, I would want to present my perspective on it, and I would invite you all to, share your input. So that's what I'm looking forward to in my session.
That sounds great. This is always the last Wednesday of the month at the same time that today. The following month we have Michelle Moral, and we are going to collaborate in talking about supervision. The next month we will have at one point Sim presenting in September. And Herman, you are going to say something?
Yeah, I do. I just want to do a plug for presentation you're going to do with Lily in the Singapore ICW presentations. And not only are you and Lily going to present, but we have Edna and, and so many people from CSA, as well as Catherine Downing. So I just invite everyone, and it's a free set of presentations, as long as you're an ICF member. If you're not an ICF member, it's 50 Singapore dollars for a whole week. We have 5 full days of presentations with all sorts of people. Anyone interested, wanting to learn more, reach out to me. But Damien and Lily are going to be presenting there, so please come and see them.
Yeah, if you want to send me information, I'm happy to share with the network, with the participants. Now, I don't think that the members from the program that I am teaching are in the mailing list, so probably you didn't receive, so I'm going to add everybody to the mailing list. And the last thing before we go, I am putting here the link. If you are not, you still may participate in our coaching supervision conference coming up at the end of the week. I think some of you are already coming, but if you have not signed up yet, you still can do it. And what I want to share with you briefly is that with Lily Ciro, we decided to change the time every day to accommodate all time zones in the world. So even though this is part of the Americas Coaching Supervisors Network, we're starting one day at 8 in the morning, one day at midday, and one day at 4 p.m. So we can accommodate to all of the time zones. And let me share with you, not many people from Asia sign up to come to the program. So we don't know if we're going to do that again in the future. So if you really want to participate, I really ask you to come to support us, because I am really, as you know, an advocate, but we need some support too. We need some participation to continue spending time. Yes, Janine, you want to say something? You need to go? We all need to go. So
we all need to go. Thank you so much, everyone.
If you want to come to the conference, the link is in the chat room. You can still sign up if you want to come, okay? And
thank you so much.
Thank you, Dharmesh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Damien.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.